Why relapses occur. Understanding why or why not relapses occur and agreeing on it can be very helpful as you move towards repairing the heart in a situation where relapse has occurred. Now, I will say this, it is the best to have this understanding with the addict while the addict is in a sober mind, okay? I would not try to discuss this 2 days after a relapse, okay? The best time to watch this and agree on this is when there's a period of sobriety, and let's discuss what a relapse really is. Let's discuss what it's not. Let's have a conversation. Now, someone who just relapsed has moved back into object reality. And if you watch some of our other tapes, you understand that. Object reality, real briefly, is this. People have no value. They go into an altered state and souls have no value. This is the addict. There are no rules when they go in that other world, okay? They're not in any relational perspective. And they decide what's right and wrong, and there is no morality in that other world. When you're an addict, you do what you want to do, when you want to do, and no one tells you what to do. That's part of the addiction. That's part of the mindset. And when you act out, you go back to that mindset, and it can take a little while to get you back into sober thinking or relational thinking. So that's why you want to have the conversation when they're not in that state. Now, relational reality is where most of the wives are, where most of where partners are, okay? Our husbands, if they have a female addict, okay? They're in relational reality. People do have value, okay? There is absolute right and wrong. And you aim to do what's right. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal. Those are wrong. You don't do those things, okay? Now, that's the difference. So when an addict goes back to object world, it can take a while for them to kind of sober up to get back to relational thinking. So if they're having a period of sobriety, let's talk about what a relapse is. Let's talk about the intentionality. Let's talk about the path to a relapse. Let's talk about what it takes to relapse. And understand that at any point, those could be circumvented by incorporating recovery, okay? Now, there's a lot more on the object reality and relational reality if you're interested on the DVD Unstuck. Very helpful to understand that stuff. Okay, now, so what you want this to be, this conversation to be, as rational as possible when the addict is experiencing the sober-mindedness, go over what a relapse is, write it down, okay? And they should have boundaries. They should know what relapses are, okay? And what it's not, okay? A relapse can be any of the below, but it's always 100% choice. So I want to mention a few things, okay? But as I go through these are not excuses. Okay, I've been sober for over 30 plus years. I don't make excuses. Men don't make excuses, men make plans. Boys make excuses, men make plans. Boys make excuses, men make plans. I could say that 100 times. I have said it hundreds of times, okay? Because every once in a while I get a guy who wants to have an excuse. I go, those aren't an option for men. Okay, and they just look at me like, what? Okay, and they understand. Men make men. We understand each other. Now, these are possibilities for why someone could choose to act out. A reaction to a strong emotion in the present. They're not emotionally mature. This feeling's overwhelming, and they go and they medicate. They might be medicating a past issue, family of origin, abuse, trauma, neglect. They might be having a secret that they either just realize or that they're actively keeping from their spouse or from even their sponsor or their therapist. Something they did or participated in or watched, and they don't feel good about it. And they're still not being honest, and so that's kind of regurgitating in their soul, and that is demanding medication. This also could be physiological because especially early on in recovery, the body goes through withdrawals, not an excuse, but it's an influence that the addict has to address, okay? Really good exercise, good nutrition, good to do early in recovery. And if you have any depression issues, see a doctor, that could be helpful. Now, it could be a reaction to an opportunity. You know, they found a magazine or they were talking to someone or there was alcohol on the table or whatever. There was an opportunity and they reacted to the opportunity in a way an addict would respond as a way to an adult would respond. Okay, there might be a potential to want to be liked by a person or a group, and therefore they compromise. But compromise is a choice. Okay, it might be as simple as just being in denial that they're not an addict. You know, I've had a friend who had a son who almost died 3 times from diabetic shock because he just would not accept he was diabetic. Denying that you're an addict could definitely be a reason why you might continue to relapse, because you don't have a problem, or you'll get over it when you want to, or you can quit anytime. All of that insanity. Okay? There's also the fact of not accepting that you're powerless, that you can't have that that drink or that caffeine or that workaholism or that whatever the addiction is, that porn. Not accepting that you're powerless, that I can't do that anymore. That could be a possibility. Now, choosing to fight the addiction alone and not reaching out for help, absolutely. If you're an addict, you have to have help, and you have to have phone calls, and you need a team. And if you fail to create a team, you will fail. Okay? All of these are reasons that someone could relapse or choose to relapse. But again, 100% of it's a choice. All right? If the addict decides not to mature in the moment and decides to choose the addictive behavior, he or she has made a choice not to mature, and they're responsible for the choice. So regardless of what the backstory is, the heart is responsible for what it does. I chose that, doesn't matter what the backstory is, and in choosing that, I created pain for myself and pain for you and pain for others. And that was very selfish and thoughtless and unkind. You know, that would be more of the heart of someone who's taking responsibility. Now, I want to walk through what a relapse is not. Now, understand I've been sitting in a chair for over 30 years, listening to men and women tell me about their relapses, and they have all kinds of interesting takes on that before they get sobered up. So let me run you through some of the things that a relapse is not. A relapse is not something your wife made you do. Trust me, if your wife had anything to do with it, you'd be sober. It's not something that life made you do. Actually, life would love to have you sober because you're a much better contributor when you're sober. It's not something that just happened. It was not an accident. You can actually go through and look at the steps of a relapse. They're definable. It's not something that the addict or the addiction made you do. You have a choice. If you didn't have a choice, you couldn't be an addict, because being an addict is a choice, okay? And not being an addict is a choice. A relapse is something you chose. No excuses ever. And if you live in that world, then you can take responsibility and you can move forward. And then what I'm talking about, as far as repairing your heart, is going to make much more sense to you. But if you're that person who's still minimizing and denying, well, if you wouldn't have got me upset, I wouldn't have went to the bar, and I wouldn't have picked up that girl, and I wouldn't have slept with her, it's all your fault. No. If you're upset and you're having emotional distress and you call your sponsor, they'll settle you down. And they'll send you back to your wife and apologize, and you probably could have even had sex that night. Could have been a great night. When you run and you medicate, that's a choice, and no one's responsible for you running but you. And that, whether running to fantasy, whether running to pornography, running to alcohol, it doesn't matter what you run to. If you're running, that's a choice. So I just want to be clear on that, what it is and isn't, because sometimes, especially when relapse happens, if you're the wife of an addict, I'll tell you, you're going to probably have some funky conversations. And if it's like the day of, the day after, 2 days after, there might be a few days of minimizing, denying, blaming, and some of that's a little normal for someone who's like emotionally 14 years old, but it should clear up in a few days. And if they stay in that place, then the challenge is going to be for them to stay sober, because you can't stay sober where you can't be responsible. And so it's going to be a constant plague if they stay in a place of blame. Okay? So that's what a relapse is and isn't.